Anam?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, I think we're good to go. I've started recording. We're live on YouTube and I've made Sir a co-host as well. We're good to go
Oh,
now.
okay. So should I start now? Okay. Yesterday was a dream. Tomorrow is a vision. But a day will leave. Make every yesterday a dream of happiness and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Good evening, everyone. This is your host for today, Anam Sheikh, an alumnus of B.N.N.College, and welcome to the workshop on a 15-day national level e-workshop on UGC Net JRF in English, organized by the Department of English under the patronage of Padma Shri Anna Sahib Jadhav, Bharatiya Samaj Unnati Mandal, B.N.N. College, Bhiwandi, Mumbai. It gives me immense pleasure to extend you a warm welcome on behalf of the organizer, Principal Dr. Ashok Wagh, Dr. Suteen Nikam, Head Department of English Chairman, Board of Studies in English, University of Mumbai, Dr. Shashikant Malunkar, IQAC Coordinator, and Professor Bhimrao Paikrao Sir, has clubbed all of us for this a 15-day national level e-workshop on UGC Net JRF in English. It is a moment of extreme pleasure to welcome the guests who are present here to attend this workshop. On behalf of the institution, I offer my regards to all the organizers and the people joining us. I convey my regard to the chief guest of the day, Raj Mukherjee. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation for online workshop. The schedule of the seminar will focus on the topic fiction. This workshop intends us to motivate and guide the UGC NET aspirant as well as to introduce the best strategies involved in cracking the exam. On the occasion of the centenary celebration of birth anniversary of Padma Shri Anna Sahib Jadhav. Welcome everyone once again. Thank you for joining for today's workshop. Even though this conference is the marker of the success of our institution, it also allows us to meet some of the brilliant minds of the country who became the chief guest for this occasion. We welcome you, sir, on behalf of the entire English department of our college. I would like to give introduction to you all about our eminent speaker, Mr. Raj Mukherjee. I find immense pleasure in introducing our eminent speaker, Raj Mukherjee, working as an assistant professor of English at Netaji Subhash Mahavidyalaya, Haldibari. He completed his MA with a first class degree from Vishwa Bharati University in the year 2017. He earned his MPhil degree in 2019 and currently pursuing his doctoral research from Vishwa Bharati Shantiniketan. He had also qualified for the UGC NET JRF Award Junior Research Fellowship. His research areas include historical novels, partition literature, classical literature, Indian mythology, mysticism, and Tagore. He has published more than 20 research articles in international journals and books. Apart from being a university champion in quiz and state level champion in debate, his passion lies in creative writing, the citation example. He can be reached at rajrajmukherjee@gmail.com. Literature is a luxury, fiction is a necessity. G.K. Chesterton. Today he will address us about fiction. A work of fiction is created in the imagination of its author. The author invents the story and make up the characters, the plot or storyline, the dialogue, and sometimes even the setting. A fictional work does not claim to tell a true story. Instead, dear viewers, it immerses us in experiences that we may never have in real life, introduces us to types of people we may never met, and take us to places we may never visit. In any other way, fiction can inspire us, introduce us, scare us, and engage us in new ideas. It can help us see ourselves and our world in new and when a literary work is labeled fiction, it indicates to the reader that the writer content is original and unique to the author's imagination. This allows for expansive creative opportunities on the part of the writers and encourages suspension of this belief among readers in order to accept the world as it is invented and presented by the author. What is fiction? What are the types of fiction? How many genres are there in fiction? All this question, dear viewers, which arises in our mind will be answered by a distinguished accommodation keynote speaker, Mr. Raj Mukhopadhyay. I now request our esteemed guest to take the stage and deliver the keynote address.
Well, am I audible, madam?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, okay. Can I share my screen?
Yes, you can
show the
share.
point?
Yes, you can
Thank
share.
you. Is my PPT visible, madam?
No, right now it is not. Yes, now it is visible. Yes, sir.
Yes, the PowerPoint is visible.
Yes, it
can
is
you
visible.
see it? Okay. Thank you so much. So thank you, madam, for giving such a nice introduction. Actually, at the very outset, I would like to offer my sincere regards to my teachers, for whose blessings, for whose encouragement, I am now standing as a speaker in this workshop. Because the day when I was struggling with my NET and SET exam, they were a source of constant encouragement, help, guidance, and blessings. My teacher, Professor Gautam Kushal sir, Professor Amrit Sen sir, and my supervisor, Dr. Tuku Biswas sir, my pranam to all of them. I also offer my humble regards to Professor Sudhir Nikam sir for providing me this opportunity to speak in such a workshop. I also extend my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Srikant Chavan sir, Principal sir of B.N.N.College, Vivandi, for allowing me to share my views in this national level e-workshop on UGC NET JRF in English. And I also offer my regards and my best wishes to all the participants, the young scholars and students who are now watching this program. I hope you will crack NET JRF in the very upcoming exam. So the topic which has been assigned to me is fiction. And before going deep into my discussion, I would like to share some strategies or techniques which I think might be helpful for all of you. And I would like to clear at the very outset of my lecture that it is not possible for me to delve deep and talk about each and every fiction of world literature in details in such a limited time. What I shall do that I shall focus more on those important techniques and strategies which I think will be very helpful for all of you. And I shall also make a list of a suggestive list of the fiction, the text, the important text which you must read in order to crack NET and JRF. Right. So one thing that I would like to share with you that NET or SET is a very tough exam. If I go by the trend of last few years, we will see that near about 70,000 to 80,000 candidates, and I'm talking on our discipline, that is English. So more than 70,000 candidates apply for the exam, among which near about 60,000 appear for the exam. And among those 60,000, 1% to 2% students qualify. So the ratio is nearly 100:1. So it is indeed a tough exam, if not the toughest, right? So in order to crack NET or JRF, the first thing that you need to have is confidence on yourself, that yes, I can do. You may fail in your very first attempt, but don't get disheartened. Don't lose your stamina, right? This is the very foremost thing that you need to have as a scholar, as a student, your patience. So you must be patient. Don't get disheartened if you just qualify in your first or second attempt. To be very honest, I did not qualify NET in my first attempt. I qualified it in my third attempt and got JRF in the fourth. So keep trying and study hard. If you dedicate at least 6 months wholeheartedly in preparing your topics, I am pretty sure that you do have a high chance of qualifying net. At least 12 to 14 hours per day, and throughout consistently through 6 months at least. So few things that you need to know, that the first thing, focus on any topic, any one topic. You know that the syllabus, if you go to the syllabus of the net, they have 10 to 15 variety of topics. Don't try to grab them at the same time, you will fail. So focus on individual topic and prepare accordingly. So if you are starting with poetry, read poetry, then move on to fiction, then to plays and dramas, then to literary theories, etc. So don't try to grab all the topics at the same time. It will create confusion and you will end up being nowhere. The second most important thing that you need to follow is that create time slots for each and every topic. Because if you read one topic throughout the entire day, it will be a very monotonous one. So suppose you start your day with poetry. Throughout the entire morning, you read poetry. Change your taste in the afternoon, read fiction. And in the evening, you can read plays or dramas or literary criticism. And at night, before going to bed, practice the first paper. You know, there is a compulsory first paper, compulsory for all subjects. You need to practice that too. So create your time slot according to your own convenience, according to your wish, in whichever way you feel it comfortable. Then I shall request you to follow a formula of 3R. See, I have written read, repeat, and revise. This is my own formula, which I have adopted when I was a student, when I was preparing for NET set exam. So you have to read a topic, and you see, we are not computers, we are human beings. We don't have computer brain. In order to qualify NET and JRF, you need to have millions and millions of information. Okay, so it is very hard to memorize, to remember all those informations. So what we have to do, you have to read, and you will see that after a couple of days, you are forgetting the same topic which you have read 2 days earlier. So you have to repeat. And I would request you to dedicate a particular day in the week, maybe it can be Saturday or Sunday, devote that entire day for revision. Revision is very, very important in your preparation. If you don't revise, you will forget everything the night before you appear for the exam. So read, repeat, and revise. Another thing which you can adopt, that you can create your own personal scrapbook or notebook, and where you can jot down, where you can point all the important informations. Suppose you are reading a novel, suppose, or a play. Let's take the example of Shakespeare's Macbeth. Just write the title of Macbeth, from where it is taken, the year of publication, the major characters, summary of the entire plot, and if there is any other important information. So if in this way, if you jot down the important information in your own personal notebook, it will be immense helpful, because the night before going to exam, if you just go through the pages of your notebook, you will read the entire syllabus, the entire the entire thing in your head you will have. So it is really helpful for you. The last two things that you need to follow, or it is better to follow, that you must solve the question papers of previous years, right? It is very helpful, at least 20 years. And in the course of solving previous year questions, you will see that how the the structure or the pattern of question is changing. Because during the year 2005 to 2008 or 10, the questions were a bit easy. Question focused on the title of any text, the year of publication, the major characters, etc. But now, although the questions are objective, but the questions are subjective in approach. They are now trying to give question in between the lines or reference to the context. So you need to read in between the text also. So the questions are coming a bit tough nowadays, and you have to deal with it. Nothing can be done. And after solving previous year questions, you must proceed to solve the model question papers. There are plenty of books available in the market, like Arihant or Utkarsh, both for the subject paper as well as for the first paper. And if you solve model question papers, you will gain confidence, and you can assess yourself what percentage of marks I am carrying, or is there any development or not. So uh, you can see your own lacuna, right? Where are your negative points, and there is always a scope for improvement. Then yes, I was of course talking about the strategies. Let me share with you. Say fiction is an all-inclusive genre, right? So you cannot start all the fictions or all literature at the same time. It's better to follow a chronology or step by step, read step by. So you can start by age, right? If you start with Middle English, then you gradually proceed to Renaissance literature, then Restoration, then Enlightenment or 18th century, then to long 19th century, then modernism, and then the post-war fiction. Or you can read by region also. You can read British fiction, then you move on to European fiction, then American, then African, Indian, etc. So you can read by region, or you can read by genres, right? Genres, reading by genres can be a bit difficult, because there are many genres and subgenres of English literature. There are social novels, there are sentimental novels, there are detective fictions. Is there a problem?
Uh,
Hello.
yes, sir. The PPT is not visible right now.
uh, the PPT is not visible.
No, no,
Is
sir.
it now visible?
No, no, sir. Yes, now it is visible.
Now it is visible.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so can I continue, madam?
Yes, yes, you can continue.
So you can read by genres also. So you can start with social novels, then sentimental novels. You can go on to detective fiction, science fiction, dystopian novels, then historical fiction. There are partition literature. So there are genres and subgenres. But if you go this way, if you continue in this way, it can be a bit difficult, because it might be confusing. It might be a bit complex for young students. Sorry, madam. Sorry to interrupt, but someone is unmuting his microphone. Okay. Now it is okay, I think. So read by this age or region or genres. Next important point is you have to focus on women writers, because if you just read, if you go through the last year question papers, frequent questions are coming focusing on women writers. So whenever you read, just mark the women writers, or you can take names and the or the published works of respective authors in your personal notebook, and read them or give them more emphasis. And focus on novels or stories which address the issues of sexuality, gender related issues like gay or lesbian or queer criticism, which we call, and the issues relating to environment. So these kind of texts are really worthy of reading, right? Next, focus on authors who have received prizes or accolades, right? Like the Booker Prize winners, Nobel Prize winners, the Sahitya Academy Award winners in case of our country, India, the Pulitzer Prize winners, and just take a note, just a search in the Google that who have won prizes, these prizes recently. I mean, in the last 10 years or last 15 years. Chances are high that contemporary authors, questions from contemporary authors will come, rather than the Nobel Prize winners of, say, 19 in the decade of 1950s or 1960s. So focus on contemporary authors, recent, those who have won Nobel Prize or Booker Prize recently, in recent times. Then you must focus on novels which have been adapted into movies, right? So, for example, Bapsi Sidhwas, her novel Cracking India has been adapted into a movie by Deepa Mehta named Arth. I think most of us have watched it. It's starring Nandita Sen, Amir Khan. It is a very beautiful movie. So focus on those novels or texts which have been adapted into movies and give more emphasis on minor characters. So this is a point which I need to clarify. You see that over the years, the paper setters are giving more emphasis on minor characters because they think that students or good students, they have read the canonical text. They have given enough emphasis on major characters. So now they are giving question from minor characters because we, the students, generally neglect those minor characters. We do not read by heart. So this is an important technique that give equal emphasis on minor characters and of course on women characters. Now give him emphasis on a series of novels or sequels or the trilogies that we have in literature. For example, Chinua Achebe's The African Trilogy, including Things Fall Apart, No Longer at Ease, and Arrow of God. I think many universities have in their syllabus the first novel of this series, The Things Fall Apart. But generally what students do, they neglect the other novels. They neglect No Longer at Ease and Arrow of God. And there is a high chance of question coming from the other two sequels, not from Things Fall Apart. I'm not saying that question will not come, but there are possibilities that questions will come from the prequel or the sequels. Or for example, if you take John Galsworthy's The Forsyte Saga, and you also have to look whether there is any important quote or important speech or dialogues among the characters or not. So if there is any important dialogue, you need to read that too. Now another very general technique is that you need to read the opening and closing lines of important or major text. For example, the opening lines of A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, we all know, right? So these are the strategies that you need to follow. Focus on the setting of the text too. In case of Jane Austen's novels, the setting is very important, and along with the setting, you have to look the title and the subtitle. I think in most of the works in 17th century and 18th century and 19th century, there are subtitles of novels, and question come from subtitles. We usually regard the title, the main title. We usually neglect the subtitle, but question comes from the subtitle. And read the text which have a very similar title. They might be confusing. For example, Joseph Conrad's The Shadow Line. I remember when I gave West Bengal set in the year 2017, in the month of December, the question came. This question came: the who wrote The Shadow Line? Most of the students answered it wrongly because they thought, oh, shadow lines. Of course, it will be Amitav Ghosh, but no. Amitav Ghosh's title is The Shadow Lines. Lines here is plural. But Joseph Conrad had written The Shadow Line. It is singular, and that too with a subtitle, A Confession, published in the year 1916. So these are very confusing to young students. And another example would be E.M. Foster, A Passage to India. Nirod C. Chaudhury's book, A Passage to England, bear a bit similar title. So these are confusing to young students. When you will be reading 500 novels, 1000 plays, and 2000 poems, you will get confused. So read this by heart. That is why you need to create your own personal notebook. And if the title is borrowed from another text, for example, this E.M. Foster borrowed the title A Passage to India from Whitman's poem, taken from one of the poem of Whitman's Leaves of Grass. Chinua Achebe borrowed the title, we all know from Yeats' poem, The Second Coming, that things fall apart, the center cannot hold. So if the title of any text has been borrowed from another text, you need to give focus on that. Lastly, there are a few novels of different authors belonging to different countries and different ages, but the novels are connected. For example, Jarvis, The White Sargasso Sea, which was published in the year 1966, is actually a feminist prequel to Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, which was published more than 100 years ago, 1847. Right. So when you are reading Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, please read Jarvis' White Sargasso Sea, because the subject matter or the themes are in a way related or connected with each other. Next example that I'd like to give is a James Coates's Foe, which is narrated around the existing plot of Robinson Crusoe, the famous novel of Daniel Defoe. So when an UG student is reading Robinson Crusoe, he or she must read JM Quates is for. Because if you cannot relate one text with another, and the questions of net or set most time focuses on this, the interconnectedness between two texts. Then again, I can give the example of Henry Fielding Shamela, which is an attack, a burlesque against Richardson's famous novel Pamela, right? So another thing you need to do is that you need to read the summaries, because you know it is quite impossible to read the entire text, be it novel or long plays of the entire world literature. So you need to take help of the internet, take help of online platforms like the websites that are available, Spark Notes or Great Saver. It saves you time. Of course, if you have time, if you are able, you are welcome to read the entire text. It is the best one. It is the best. There is no other alternative. But most students face difficulty because there is hardly any time. After 6 months, you will be facing the next set exam. So read synopses of long novels instead of reading the entire text, right? It is often useful. Now, delving deep into my topic, you see the basic ideas of fiction, right? Focusing on the genre, if I do. So fiction is primarily any narrative in prose, which is a blend of imagination and reality, right? So there is not complete reality. If there is complete reality, then it will become a non-fiction, right? So the author has to maintain a perfect balance between imagination and reality. The more the balance, the more the work will be worthy of appreciation. And fiction is basically an inclusive genre, which not only includes novels, but also includes novellas, stories, comic books, or nowadays the term that we use, the graphic novels, movie scripts, fables, fairy tales, mythological tales, and there is an emerging genre nowadays, rapidly emerging genre focusing on mythological tales, but the way of representation is contemporary. So these are called the mythofiction. Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni's The Palace of Illusion is one such example. Apart from, we have this contemporary very popular writer Ashwin Sanghi or Prabhu Amish, etc. They write about Indian mythologies, right? Fiction includes all these genres. Any fiction is always based on reality, but you have to keep in mind that at the same time it deviates from reality. So character and events in a fictional world, right, as if they exist in a completely altogether universe, right? But that universe is modeled or is based on our physical universe. There is apparently no connection, but the structure of that fictional universe is closely modeled on our universe. For example, Thomas Hardy's Wessex novels. Wessex is a fictional place. It is nowhere to be found in Earth, but we know that it is a combination of Westminster and Sussex. So Wessex is just like any other town, any other area. We are all a very fan of the DC and Marvel books, Batman. So Batman city Gotham is just like any other city, which has its own mayor, which has its own administration, roads, the towers, and the functioning of the administrative system. So Gotham can be any other city like New York or Delhi or Mumbai or Calcutta or Washington. For example, Harry Potter's Hogwarts. Hogwarts is just like any other school. In schools, we read mathematics, physics, history, philosophy, English, and other languages. The only difference is they study magic instead of mathematics and science and humanities, etc. So this balance, the balance is very important. Balance between imagination and reality. And the author does not bear the responsibility of adhering to factual representation of truths. So it depends on the author that how much, what quantity of truth will be there and what will be the percentage of imagination. And truth and imagination are combined in a complex fabric of narration. If I give the example of Jules Verne's science fiction writer From the Earth to the Moon, published in 1865, it is a purely work of based on imagination, purely imaginary work, because the actual voyage to moon took place in the year 1969 when this Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin went to moon. Another example would be Bibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay's Chander Pahar. Translation would be A Mountain of the Moon. So Bandyopadhyay's novel Mountain of the Moon is set in Africa, although the author in his lifetime never went to Africa. And mind it, at that time there was no Google, there was no Google Maps. The only thing that he relied on is maps and books available in libraries. So these are an exclusive genre of fiction which is purely based on imagination. In case of historical fiction, to another very important segment of fiction, the plot is based on real historical places or characters. But what differs is the art of storytelling, that is the representation of that event, the events which have already occurred in the past. Characters are real, places are real, but the art of representation, the art of storytelling is imaginary. Fiction can also be based on supernatural, paranormal, or magical events. There are plenty of ghost stories in Victorian era, right? And a new genre has emerged, the uncanny literature, literature of the uncanny. Many scholars are doing their PhDs and MPhils in this genre. So examples would be Bram Stoker's Dracula, or Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy, J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, and of course, Oscar Wilde's Picture of Dorian Gray. We know, I think more or less all of us have read these fictions, these novels. We know the subject matter. So how the author has combined magical elements, supernatural elements, or paranormal incidents and the real life incidents. So these are a few things which you need to know. These are the few strategies which are extremely important in order to crack NET or JRF examination. So now I'm just giving you a list. I am telling that this list is not exhaustive. You can, as of course, add any other important works which you feel that is important, it is worthy of reading in the list which I have prepared for you. So I have found convenience in going through age and region, right? So let's start with British fiction. And prose as a distinct literary genre came into prominence during early 16th century. The text that we have is Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur, published in 1485. Then we have Francis Bacon's the utopian novel New Atlantis, published in 1626, and Francis Godwin's The Man in the Moon, published in 1638. So these are prose works, but not exactly novel in the truest sense of the term. Then in the Renaissance period, we had John Lilly's didactic romance, Euphues. Again, remember, this is a series. There are two novels, right? Euphues, The Anatomy of Wit, and its sequel, Euphues and His England. So whenever and wherever you find a series, a trilogy, a sequel and prequel, please give much emphasis. Then we have Philip Sidney's prose romance Arcadia. Right? You know that in the age of Renaissance, the leading genre was play and poetry. Prose was a bit marginalized, and it continued till the 18th century. So in the Restoration period, again, the dominant genre was comedy. We had a plenty of Restoration playwright, Restoration comedy, but prose was also there. And an example would be John Bunyan's historical fiction, theological fiction, The Pilgrim's Progress, which is presented as a dream sequence, and it acts as a guide to Christian life. So combination of spirituality and reality. Then we have Ofra Ben's Urunuku, the subtitle is important, or The Royal Slave. And in the 18th century, that is in the age of enlightenment, we have witnessed the rise of literacy rate, the establishment of the printing press, and this created an entire segment, an entire class of educated readership, right? And the authors who wrote novels in this age try to satisfy the taste of the targeted readers. The first would be Samuel Richardson's epistolary fiction. You know the term epistolary, written in the form of letters, right? Pamela, published in 1740, and many critics agree that Pamela is the first novel in English literature in the truest sense of the term. Apart from Pamela, Richardson had also written Clarissa, right? And there are other novels too. Then we have the Scottish novelist Tobias Smollett picaresque novels, The Adventure of Roderick Random, Adventure of Peregrine Pickle, The Expedition of Humphrey Clinker, and others. And mind it, here for the first time we have a Scottish hero, a Scottish protagonist, and the style of smallest writing largely influenced none other than Charles Dickens. Then we have the great novelist Daniel Defoe, right? So Daniel Defoe, you cannot omit as any single novel. You have to read all the novels, right? Starting from Robinson Crusoe, the further adventures of Robinson Crusoe, Captain Singleton, Memoirs of a Cavalier, Journal of the Plague Year, Colonel Jack, Moll Flanders, Roxana. So read all the novels because Defoe is an important novelist, a leading figure of that era. Then we have Henry Fielding's, Joseph Andrews, Jonathan Wild, and we have Fielding's masterpiece, Tom Jones. Right. So if you think that, well, we have Tom Jones in our syllabus, and if you neglect the other two novels, Joseph Andrews and Jonathan Wild, that would not serve the purpose. Question can come from Joseph Andrews and Jonathan Wild, because the paper setters know that since you have Tom Jones, it is expected that you know the story and other subject, the themes of Tom Jones. They will test whether you have read Joseph Andrews or not. So please focus on other novels of the writers. Then we have Jonathan Swift's, famous for his magnum opus Gulliver Travels. He had also written A Tale of the Tub. Then we have a separate genre, the sentimental novels. The prominent figures are Oliver Goldsmith, who had written The Vicar of Wakefield. We have Lawrence Stearns' Tristram Shandy and A Sentimental Journey. The structure is very important in case of Tristram Shandy. Please give a bit focus on this. We have Novel of Manners. For example, Frances Burney's Evelina, or The History of a Young Lady's Entrance into the World. The subtitle is very important. I was repeatedly talking about the subtitle. Please give attention to this. We have then Gothic fiction, a new genre, Gothic fiction. The prominent figures are Horace Walpole's, famous for writing The Castle of Otranto. Then we have Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho, and Matthew Levy's The Monk. So Gothic fiction and Bram Stoker's Dracula, although it is written in the Victorian era, but falls under the category of Gothic fiction. Then Romantic period. Once again, Romantic period is marked by poetry. Right? Primarily poetry. We have the leading figures, the great names, Wordsworth, Coleridge, and others. Right? Keats, Shelley, Byron. But prose was not at all neglected. We had Jane Austen, and you need to read all the 6 novels of Jane Austen, starting from Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Emma, Northanger's Abbey, and Persuasion. And keep it in your mind that if you go through the last year question papers, question on Jane Austen come alternatively. At least one question on Jane Austen you can expect, right? And please focus on the setting of Jane Austen's novels, right? For example, Sense and Sensibility is set in Southwest England. We have Mansfield Park in Northamptonshire of East Midland, and suppose Emma is set in Yorkshire. So please focus on the setting of Jane Austen's novels. After Jane Austen, we have Mary Shelley. We all know that she had written Frankenstein. The subtitle is or the Modern Prometheus. And apart from Jane Austen or Mary Shelley, we have the historical novels of Walter Scott, a very famous historical novelist. There are plenty of novels, and among those novels, you must read Ivanhoe, Rob Roy, the Waverley novels, The Heart of Midlothian, Quentin Durward, and others. Right. So please read at least the storyline, the summary of this novel, the synopsis at least. Then Victorian era. So novel became the leading genre of this era. And the factors are the establishment of public libraries, improved printing technology, and the wide circulation of journals and magazines. We know there were reputed journals where eminent authors used to publish their novels in a serial way, like Cornhill magazine, where Dickens's novels were published. Right. So plenty of widely accepted and reputed journals. So in this way, novel catered to the taste of the audience in the Victorian era. Charles Dickens, again, you cannot omit any novel. Dickens is extremely important, right? And you need to at least read the storyline of all Dickens's novels, be it Dombey and Son, Oliver Twist, David Copperfield, Bleak House, Great Expectations. Okay, so you need to read all the novels. Remember the storyline, the setting, the major characters as well as the minor characters. Okay, so then Thackeray's Vanity Fair is another important one. Bronte sisters, how can we forget about the Bronte sisters? So Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, but focus on lesser known novels like Shirley, Viete, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, because the paper setters know that you have read Wuthering Heights by heart, you have read Jane Eyre, but have you read Shirley? Have you read Viete? So question can come on lesser known novels, and it can be a tricky one. So you have to prepare accordingly. Then we have Elizabeth Gaskell's The Mary Barton, North and South. Related is the Industrial Revolution, the impact of Industrial Revolution in contemporary England. We have Anthony Trollope's Berkshire novels. There is a series of novels, at least read few of them. George Eliot is another important uh, novelist. And I forgot to mention that many of these authors adopted pen name, right? The real name of George Eliot is Mary and Evans. And the Bronte sisters too, we know that they had published under pen name like Anne Bell, Currer Bell, Ellis Bell. So hiding their real name. So please focus on the pen names and the real names of the author. When I shall move on to the American section, we will find Mark Twain, whose real name was Samuel Langhorne Clemens. So please focus on authors who publish his or her work in pen names or pseudonyms. Right? So George Eliot's Adam Bede, The Mill on the Floss, Middlemarch, Silas Marner, Felix Holt, these are worthy of mentioning. We have George Meredith, primarily famous for two novels, The Ordeal of Richard Feverel and The Egoist. Then we have, last but not the least, Thomas Hardy, the great man Thomas Hardy. And in like Charles Dickens, you cannot omit any single novel of Thomas Hardy. You have to read all of them. Hardy is extremely important, be it Tales of the D'Urbervilles, Far from the Madding Crowd, Mayor of Casterbridge, Jude the Obscure, Return of the Native, or lesser known works like The Woodlanders. Because you have to read Woodlanders because it focuses on environmental issues, right? So focus on lesser known works also, because the type of question that are coming nowadays, not focusing on major works. After Thomas Hardy, we have George Gissings, famous for writing New Grub Street, right? Then in the Victorian era, apart from this classical social novel, we also have the emerging genre of popular fiction, right? And these includes adventure novels like Sir Henry Rider Haggard's King Solomon Mines. I think we all have read this beautiful, excellent novel. Apart from King Solomon Mines, we have Anthony Hope's The Prisoner of Zenda, published in the year 1894. And this is very important because a Bengali historical novelist, Sharadindu Bandyopadhyay, has adopted a brilliant text, brilliant novel, Jinder Bondi, which is based on Anthony Hope's The Prisoner of Zenda, right? Then we have Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, another adventure, very famous novel. We like to read when we were young students. Then the emergence of detective fiction in this era, starting with Wilkie Collins' The Moonstone. The Moonstone, many critics consider Moonstone to be the first detective novel written in English, right? And we also have, at the later part of this 19th century, we have Arthur Conan Doyle, very famous Sherlock Holmes stories. We also have science fiction, H.G. Wells, The Time Machine, Invisible Man, The War of the Worlds, and few might question that why I have included H.G. Wells in Victorian era. Many critics consider him as part of the modern novelist, but since his novels are published before the 20th century, that is why I have included H.G. Wells in Victorian era. But you have the freedom to include Wells in modern era too. So it is not about the modern age or the Victorian age. You need to read all the works. At least the major works of important novels. Then we have the children's literature, Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, and the sequel, Through the Looking Glass. And these two novels form part of or comes under the nonsense literature as well, right? So rise of the nonsense literature. Nonsense literature is now in vogue. PhDs and MPhils are being done in major universities. So nonsense literature also emerged during this Victorian period. We have horror fiction. I was talking about Bram Stoker's Dracula. We had Henry James Turn of the Screw, right? So this type of genres, emerging genres, catering to the taste of populace, right? Be it nonsense literature or horror fiction, gothic fiction, detective fiction, adventure stories. So a number of popular fiction emerged, which transformed the dimension of this genre of fiction. Now, if we proceed to the modern age, right? So I think I need not to say the factors behind the style of writing emerged in the 20th century. Of course, the impact of two world wars which were fought, the rise of industry, and the shift from agrarian economy to an industry-based economy. And there was also, we witnessed that the metropolis center civilization, large cities became the hub of social and cultural interaction. And due to the unfortunate impact of the world wars, we have the growing nihilism and psychological crisis, cultural and social degeneration. If you read T.S. Eliot, you'll find, you all know. Since I am dealing with fiction, I'm not going into those details. And apart from this psychological degeneration or moral breakdown, we also have the desire, the craving, the urge to make it new, as Ezra Pound would have called it. And these are some important traits of 20th century fiction, which you, of course, need to know. Now, 20th century fiction, the important works are John Galsworthy's Forsyte Saga. We have Arnold Bennett's The Old Wives' Tale, the Clayhanger trilogy. And again, we have E.M. Foster, another very important novelist. And you have to read all novels of Foster. You cannot just skip one or two, right? While reading Foster novels, just focus on the title, right? From where the title has been taken. Example, his novel Where Angels Fear to Tread, Foster took from Alexander Pope's essay on criticism. A passage to India has been taken from Whitman's poem. So these are the few techniques that you need to keep in your mind while reading Foster's novels. Then we have the Nobel laureate Rudyard Kipling's, famous for his Jungle Book, focusing Mowgli. I think a movie has also been made on the Jungle Book. Another very important work is Kim. I think in many universities, Kim, the novel Kim, is included in the syllabus. I think in UG. Then we have the establishment of the Bloomsbury Group, right? So just to give a notice on this Bloomsbury Group, its members, reputed members like Virginia Woolf, her sister Vanessa Bell, Clive Bell, Leonard Woolf, Lytton Strachey, E.M. Foster, all these eminent members who were associated with this Bloomsbury Group. When it was established, the ideas, the ideologies shared by its respected members, etc. Now, coming to Virginia Woolf, you have to read all novels of Virginia Woolf, right? The major ones also, the lesser ones like The Waves and The Flush. Not only that, you will read To the Lighthouse, it will not serve the purpose. So focus on lesser known novels. And we know that Virginia Woolf was a major propounder of the stream of consciousness technique. And other writers of this genre, the stream of consciousness technique, Dorothy Richardson is of worth mentioning, famous for his novel The Pointed Roof, published in 1915. Then you have to read D.H. Lawrence's. Again, D.H. Lawrence is a major figure, and if it is better if you read his novels, all novels if possible, like Sons and Lovers, The Rainbow, Women in Love, Lady Chatterley's Lover, The White Peacock, and please go through the controversy and his trial regarding Lady Chatterley's Lover, because Lawrence was charged with obscenity for using the slang word starting with F, right? So just read. So it is also better if you read a short biography of the major novelist, right, or the major writers, right? Question from biographies from the author's life also come in NET exam. George Orwell, for example. Why I am talking about the biographies? Because George Orwell was born in India, like William Makepeace Thackeray. Right. So George Orwell, Animal Farm, 1984 dystopian fiction. So These are important works and which promulgate a dystopian vision and act as a sharp critique against totalitarianism. Then after Orwell, just proceed to Evelyn Waugh's Vile Bodies, Decline and Fall, A Handful of Dust, Brideshead Revisited, and novels like this. And I think questions on Evelyn Waugh have been coming for the last 5 to 6 years. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, Point Counterpoint, very important works these are. Now, Graham Greene. Graham Greene is a very important and major novelist. Important in the sense because Somerset Maugham, Graham Greene, they created, or not created, but they made it to they made popular the genre of espionage literature, spy fiction. So apart from novels like Istanbul Train or Brighton Rock, Greene's espionage fiction like The Confidential Agent, Our Man in Havana, they satisfied the taste of the new urban readers of 20th century, of the modern age. Then William Golding, a very important novelist, famous for writing Lord of the Flies, Darkness Visible. Please read these novels. Irish Murdoch. Irish Murdoch, famous for writing the Black Prince Gothic romance like The Unicorn Under the Net. And Irish Murdoch has received a number of prizes like the Booker Prize, James Tate Black Memorial Prize. So please read the prizes received by Irish Murdoch, right? Because sometimes questions come in it, they give two columns. On the left hand, there are the names of the authors, the novelists, the writers, and on the right hand column, the names of the prizes received by respective authors. And you have to match. You have to match the following sort of thing. You know, those who have given it, they know. So it's better to read briefly the biographies of important novelists. Now, Muriel Spark, a very important novel of late modernism, famous for writing The Prime of Miss Jane Brodie, Mandelbaum, The Driver's Seat, Memento Mori, Public Image. So just read Muriel Spark all novels if possible, because questions have been repeatedly coming focusing on late modernist writer rather than the writers of early modernism. Then Anthony Burgess, The Clockwork Orange, published in 1962. Then yes, I was talking about Somerset Maugham, and see Somerset Maugham, it is important to read his biography, his life and career, because he was a real life spy. He was recruited into the British Secret Intelligence Service, or the MI6 as we call it. He had been recruited in Russia, he had worked in India, the Southeast Asia, and he wrote the spy novels from his own personal and professional experiences, right? So spy novels like Ascendant or The British Agent, not novels, but it's a collection of short stories. And writers like Somerset Maugham influenced Ian Fleming to write the James Bond series, the Spanish thriller. And apart from Spanish fiction, he has also written Lisa of Lambeth of Human Bondage, published in the year 1915, is an autobiographical novel which blurs the distinction between fact and fiction. So at the beginning of my lecture, I was talking about this blend of reality and imagination. So if you read of Human Bondage, you will have an idea that how Somerset Maugham is blurring or the stark distinction between fact and fiction, reality and imagination, and creating a complex web of ideas, right? So I would again request you all to give more concentration, more emphasis on these areas, right? Because questions have been coming focusing on late modernist writers rather than writers of earlier modernism. The pattern of question has been changed, right? Then I think I have quite done with this British fiction, then move on to American fiction, another important part. So before going deep into American fiction, you need to know the historical background, like the American War of Independence, right? The abolition of slavery by Abraham Lincoln, the Black Power movement, the decade of Great Depression after the First World War. I mean, the decade of 1930s, the Great Depression era. There have been communist uprisings, socialist movements in America, and how these movements have been smashed down by the repressive authority, and of course, the world wars between America and Russia, etc. So these are the few historical issues which you need to know while reading American literature, right? And now it all started with Washington Irving's Rip Van Winkle, very famous fable or fairy tale, the man who used to sleep for I think 400 years, right? So the Legend of Sleepy Hollow is another important work. We have John Niels, who had written Keep Cool, 76 novels like this. We have James Fenimore Cooper, very famous writer who wrote The Last of the Mohicans, published in 1826. And while reading this Washington Irving or Cooper and Neal, please keep it in mind, or please read the John Neal's criticism against Washington Irving and Fenimore Cooper. And Neal criticized them because, according to him, they have relied more on older British conventions of story writing. And John Neal wanted to create a distinct mode of a new mode of American writing, which will be different from the British counterparts, right? So there was a debate, a literary debate between these three authors. If you have time, please read. Then we have Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe, who is very famous for short stories focusing on ghost and uncanny literature, etc. There are also poems like Raven, eerie poem. So Edgar Allan Poe he wrote detective stories like The Parliament Letter, right? So Poe is a classy author who had catered or who had written on adventure, detective, ghost stories, etc., rather than writing focusing more on social issues. Then we have Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. The subtitle is again very important, or Life Among the Lowly, published in 1852. I think many of us have read this particular novel. It tells us the plight, the miserable condition, the pitiable condition of the Black African American people who were slaves in America. So Uncle Tom's Cabin is also worthy of reading. Now we have Nathaniel Hawthorne, the three authors who are considered as the dark romantics, right? Edgar Allan Poe, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and Herman Melville. So Hawthorne is famous for writing dark romances like The Scarlet Letter, The House of Seven Gables, The Blithedale Romance, and others. We have read, I think, Herman Melville's Moby Dick. The subtitle is important, or The Whale, published in 1851. Apart from Moby Dick, Melville had also written Billy Budd novels like Typee. So they are the dark romantics. Now, the slave autobiography, like the Frederick Douglass autobiography, which recounts the tradition of slave narrative, and it serves as an important text of African American literature. Yes, I was talking about Mark Twain. So Mark Twain's Life on the Mississippi, Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I think few of these books, these texts are have been already included in the syllabus, both of UG and PG. Now, move on to Stephen Crane. Stephen Crane is famous for writing the Civil War novel, The Red Badge of Courage, published in 1895. Then we have Theodore Dreiser, who wrote Sister Carrie, An American Tragedy. Then The Lost Generation. Lost Generation means the poets and the writers who moved out of America after the First World War, right? So they are the lost generation, or those who have died in the war. Gertrude Stein's Three Lives focuses on this lost generation. Very renowned author F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby movie has also been made. Please just read this novel and the movie as well, focusing on the jazz age. Then we have the Sinclair Lewis Babbitt, and mind it that Lewis was the first American to win Nobel Prize in literature. Right, John Dos Passos' Three Soldiers. Then we have Ernest Hemingway. I mean, he's the Gurudev of American fiction. If I can call, if I'm allowed to call Walt Whitman as the Gurudev of American poetry, then of course Ernest Hemingway is the icon of American fiction. And you cannot omit any novel of Hemingway. You have to read all his novels, starting from The Sun Also Rises, A Farewell to Arms, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Old Man and the Sea, and also read his biography, because he had a very disturbed life. He married a number of times, and he committed suicide. He ended his life by committing suicide, etc. So please read his biography as well. Also, he is a Nobel laureate. Another Nobel laureate, very important writer, William Faulkner, famous for writing The Sound and the Fury, As I Lay Dying, Absalom, Absalom, etc. And like Virginia Woolf or like Anita Desai of India, William Faulkner also focused on the stream of consciousness technique. And like Thomas Hardy, he created a fictional realm of called Yakuna Pataufa country, where most of his novels and stories are set. Right? So read William Faulkner by heart. And then we have John Steinbeck's, famous for writing of Mice and Men, Tortilla Flat, The Grapes of Wrath, East of Eden. And John Steinbeck is a prominent figure of working class fiction. His writing deal with the issues of working class, the crisis and the plight of working class people. Then we have Daisy Miller's Tropic of Cancer, Black Spring, which are semi-autobiographical mode, narrated in semi-autobiographical mode. Very important text is To Kill a Mockingbird. I think all of you have read, or most of us have read, by Harper Lee. And questions had come, I think, in the year 2018 or 17. Question on Harper Lee had already come. Saul Bellow's The Adventures of Augie March Herzog, J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. Then we have Sylvia Plath's autobiographical novel, The Bell Jar, a very important text in the history of American literature. Right, Plath is more famous for her poems, but The Bell Jar is worthy of reading. Then we have Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita, Jack Kerouac again, the Beat generation. They are famous for poems, right? Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, but nevertheless, Jack Kerouac had written On the Road. Then we have John Updike's Rabbit Run. Then another very important author is Toni Morrison. So Toni Morrison, a prominent figure of African American literature, and you have to read all of her novels: The Bluest Eye, Sula, Tar Baby, Song of Solomon, Beloved, and how Morrison deals with the issues of racism, gender, and slavery, the plight of African American people, their history of slavery, etc. So issues of gender, issues of race, class, these some issues which we find in Toni Morrison's novels. So you cannot omit any single novel. So like what I have suggested you in case of British 20th century fiction, concentrate more on the post-war fiction, right? Because questions are coming on contemporary writers. Then after American, if I'm allowed to proceed to African fiction, I shall at the very first point I shall suggest you to read the interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano, the slave narrative in the colonial Africa, published in 1789. Then we have the masterpiece of, Chinua Achebe. I have already mentioned his African trilogy. All the 5 novels are must read for you. And apart from the African trilogy, he had also written Man of the People and Tales of Savannah. So you cannot omit any novel of Achebe. Olu Soyinka, he also belonged from Nigeria. He's more famous for his plays, right? Olu Soyinka is primarily a playwright, but his novel, The Interpreters, published in 1965, is very important. Then we have another novelist from Nigeria, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, famous for writing Purple Hibiscus, Half of a Yellow Sun, and Americana. Ben Okri from Nigeria is famous for The Famished Road, Songs of Enchantment, and Infinite Riches. These 3 novels collectively form a trilogy. So if you think that I will only read The Famished Road, and if you don't read the other 2 sequels, other 2 novels in the series, you might have to suffer. Then Buchi Emecheta, The Bright Prince, The Slave Girl, The Joys of Motherhood are her famous novels. Amata Aidu, prominent novelist from Ghana, is famous for writing Our Sister Killjoy, published in 1977. Again, then we have the famous South African novelist J.M. Coetzee, who wrote Disgrace, Life and Times of Michael K. and Foe. Another South African prominent writer, Nadine Gordimer, famous for writing The Burgher's Daughter, The Conservationist, and July's People. There are other novels, but focus on these 3. Tanzanian author Abdul Razak Gurna, famous for writing Paradise by the Sea, Afterlives. We have Bessie Head from Botswana, famous for writing When Rain Clouds Gather, and Maru. And why I am requesting you all to read the short biography of each and every author, because if you read Bessie Head, she was an ardent follower of Mahatma Gandhi, and she was deeply influenced by the ideals and philosophies of Hinduism. So if you find any author, any novelist or poet who has in a way or either linked with, can be linked with India, please give more importance to her or him. Because I know in the year 2017, net of November 2017, a question came that there were 4 options. The actual quote was told by Charles Dickens. He said, after the Sepoy Mutiny or the Great Revolution of 1857, he said that if the Indians revolt against the British, we have the right to kill Indians, to mercilessly slaughter Indians as insects. So we didn't know that who was who said those words. It was Charles Dickens. So that is why I am saying, I am requesting you all to read the biographies of these major writers. Okay, so let's proceed to Naguib Mahfouz, a very important Egyptian author who is famous for writing the Cairo trilogy, Children of Our Ali, the Harafis, etc. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, a very important and leading figure of Kenyan literature. Now he no more writes in English, rather in Kikuyu language. Grain of Wheat, published in 1967, Petals of Blood in the year 1977, and Matigari in 1986. Another Nigerian author, Amos Tutuola, famous for writing The Palm Wine Drinker and My Life in the Booze of Ghosts. Doris Lessing from Zimbabwe is famous for writing The Grass is Singing, The Golden Notebook, The Good Terrorist. So these in short, the important works of African fiction. Now we also have a handful of important authors of European fiction, starting with Miguel de Cervantes for writing Don Quixote. We all know this novel. We have Victor Hugo from France, famous for writing La Miserable, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. We have Alexandre Dumas from France. I think we all have read her novels like The Three Musketeers, The Count of Monte Cristo. And mind it, these novels have been adapted into movies. So when you are reading these novels, please Google search that who was the director of the movie, who was the actor, etc. So the novels which have been adapted into movies is worthy of consideration. Voltaire is famous. I mean, we hail him in high regard for writing Candida. He was a philosopher. Gustave Flaubert of France, his magnum opus is Madame Bovary. Now Umberto Eco, a very important author, and questions in net set exam are coming focusing on these writers like Umberto Eco, Franz Kafka, etc. So Umberto Eco from Italy, he wrote the novel The Name of the Rose, a part detective fiction. Apart from Name of the Rose, his magnum opus, he is also famous for writing Foucault's Pendulum. Leo Tolstoy from Russia, Anna Karenina, War and Peace. That is why I was saying that please read the summary, because War and Peace is a hugely long novel. I think it is impossible for you to read the entire text. Even the synopsis is also lengthy. But you have to read because it is an important work of literature. Franz Kafka of Germany for 2 novels, The Trial and The Metamorphosis. Gunter Grass from another German novelist. He is famous for writing the Danzig trilogy, right? And in Danzig trilogy, we have the teen drum Cat and Mouse Dog Years. Milan Kundera, a very well-known author from Czechoslovakia. He had written, his prominent works include The Joke, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, etc. Orhan Pamuk, not only a philosopher, but also an eminent writer. He had written My Name is Red, Snow the Red-Haired Woman. Very important works, please read by heart. Now we have Italo Calvino from Italy, who is famous for his prose work, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, a novel which is narrated from the second person narrative. That is why it is important. And because most of the novels or most of the stories are narrated from first person or third person. And this is a work which is narrated from second person. Then a very important category, that is Indian fiction. And you can very well expect a handful of questions coming from Indian literature, be it fiction or plays or poetry. The early figures of Indian fiction writers include Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, writing Rajmohan's Wife, Lal Bihari Desh, Govinda Samanta, and these texts has been included in UG CBCS syllabus recently. So another strategy of cracking net is that just go through the UGC CBCS syllabus. which is nowadays accepted by all the universities of India, right? So if you go through UGCB syllabus, you will get an idea about the number of texts, the class of texts that you need to read. And we have the Trinity, Raja Rao, R.K. Narayan, and Mulk Raj Anand. They are considered as the Trinity of Indian English literature. Raja Rao's Kantapura, The Serpent and the Rove, and R.K. Narayan's, again, you have to read all his novels, right? You cannot omit any novel of R.K. Narayan. All are of equal importance. Worth mentioning are Swami and Friends, The Bachelor of Arts, The Guide, The Man-Eater of Malgudi, Vendor of Sweets, The English Teacher, and other novels also. Just read, again, why I'm trying, why I'm requesting you to read the biographies of authors, because if you read R.K. Narayan's life, you will see that he used to share a bonhomie with none other than Graham Greene. They used to have a very friendly relation, and how Graham Greene helped R.K. Narayan to publish his works abroad, that is worthy of reading, right? So please read, please focus on his relation with British writer Graham Greene. And like William Faulkner, like Thomas Hardy, R.K. Narayan is also famous for creating the fictional place of Malgudi. Again, then Mulk Raj Anand's famous for writing untouchable novels like Coolie, Two Leaves and a Bird, The Sword and the Sickle, The Lost Child, etc. Kamala Markandaya's Nectar in a Sieve is worth mentioning. Then we have Salman Rushdie, very leading and prominent figure of Indian literature, famous for writing The Midnight Children. Remember, this is a work of magic realism, and when you are reading Gabriel Garcia Marquez, please read Midnight Children too. He's also famous for writing Shame, The Satanic Verses, read the controversy regarding Satanic Verses, Shalimar the Crown, and his recent novel, Quixote. Nayantara Sahagal's Reach Like Us and Manohar Malgankar's A Bend in the Ganges. These are also important works. Then you have Anita Desai, Fasting Feasting, novels like In Custody, Clear Light of Day, Fire on the Mountain, Bye Bye Blackbird, Cry the Peacock. All these novels are important. Her daughter Kiran Desai is also worth mentioning. Her novel The Inheritance of Loss is widely regarded as her masterpiece. Apart from Inheritance of Loss, she had written Hullabaloo in the Guava Orchard. Ruskin Bond is he has recently received the Padma Award. He's famous for writing novels like The Room on the Roof, Our Trees Still Grow in Dehra, A Flight of Pigeons, and focus on Ruskin Bond's short stories as well. Right? He's a very good writer. Bikram Seth's The Golden Gate, A Suitable Boy, and then Amitav Ghosh. And again, you have to read all novels of Amitav Ghosh. And alternatively, you can expect a question from Amitav Ghosh coming in your NET or SET exam. So novels like The Shadow Lines, The Glass Palace, The Sea of Poppies, the Ibis trilogy, River of Smoke, Hungry Tide. So you have to read, or The Calcutta Chromosome. So please go through Amitav Ghosh's all novels, right? Read the synopsis, the story outline, the setting, the year of publication, and etc. After Amitav Ghosh, Rohinton Mistry is very important writer. Tales from Firoz Shah Bagh, Such a Long Journey, A Fine Balance. These novels is a must read. Shashi Tharoor, the great man Shashi Tharoor's novel, The Great Indian Novel, it is actually based on the epic Mahabharata, right? Published in 1989, is an important work. Booker Prize winner Aravind Adiga's The White Tiger is also important. Then we have Arundhati Roy, who is famous for writing The God of Small Things, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. Novelists like Bharati Mukherjee's Jasmine. So I am not categorizing these writers, writers like Bharati Mukherjee in a separate diaspora, right? But you can also categorize them in a separate category, diaspora, and read their novels. But since I am going by age and by region, that is why I have included these authors in Indian literature. Shashi Deshpande's That Long Silence, Jhumpa Lahiri, she is famous for writing Interpreter of Maladies, The Namesake, Unaccustomed Art, The Lowland, and recently she has moved to Rome, and she is staying in Italy, and she is learning Italian language. And in the year 2018, she had written an Italian novel named Dove Mitrovo. And I was talking about the real name and the pen name. So the real name of Jhumpa Lahiri is Nilanjana Sudeshna Lahiri. His Indian name was a bit difficult for her class teacher, and that is why her teacher gave her the name Jhumpa. Right. So the question can come focusing on the real name of any author. Bikram Chandra's Red Earth and Pouring Rain is another important text. Khushwant Singh, Train to Pakistan, and I Shall Not Hear the Nightingale are few important works. Shobha De's Socialite Evening, Starry Nights is a must read. And please focus, again, I am telling you, please focus on contemporary authors like Chitra Banerjee, Diva Karuni's novels like The Palace of Illusion. It has recently come into the news because it is the source of a Bollywood movie which is being made starring Deepika Padukone named Mahabharat. So the source, or it is this movie is partially based on Chitra Banerjee Diva Karuni's novel The Palace of Illusion. So in order to crack NET and JRF, uh, you also need to read the newspapers, right? The current affairs. Of course, current affairs is included in your first paper, which is a multidisciplinary paper. But in case of literature also, you need to be aware of the Indian literary scenario, the contemporary Indian literary scenario. Then, of course, there are other categories or genres of fiction worth mentioning. See, I have put in this list various writers. You can arrange them in your own way too. Australian writers like Patrick White and David Malouf, right? Patrick White is famous for writing Voss, the Vivisector, The Solid Mandela, Happy Valley, The Living and the Dead. David Malouf, famous for writing Remembering Babylon. Peter Carey, another Australian author, famous for writing Oscar and Lucinda, True History of the Kelly Gang. Helen Garner, another Australian novelist, she wrote A Monkey Grief, The Spare Room. Japanese fiction writer like Haruki Murakami, famous for writing Norwegian Wood, Kafka on the Shore. Nobel laureate Kazuo Ishiguro, he's also from Japan, famous for writing The Remains of the Day, When We Were Orphans, Kier and the Sun. Moving on to Sri Lankan writers, the first name that we must mention is Michael Ondarchi, famous for writing The English Patient, In the Skin of Lion, Coming Through Slaughter, Running in the Family. Then we have Margaret Atwood, and in this case also you have to read all her novels. Very important dystopian novelist, writer of dystopian novels. Famous works include The Handmaid's Tale, Surfacing, Oryx and Crake, The Blind Assassin, and other novels. So please do not omit any novel of Margaret Atwood. Question can come from any novel. Another Canadian novelist, Alice Munro, famous for writing Dance of the Happy Shades. Then V.S. Naipaul. So it is very difficult to categorize V.S. Naipaul because he is born in West Indies. He studied abroad, settled in Canada, etc. So nevertheless, I have included him in Trinidad and Tobago. V.S. Naipaul had wrote a number of novels. Important are A House for Mr. Viswas, A Bend in the River, The Mystic Mashior, The Mimic Men, The Suffrage of Elvira, Miguel Street, etc. Sam Shelvadurai, another important Sri Lankan writer, famous for writing The Funny Boy. See, Funny Boy is an important text because it deals with the issues of racism, gay relationship, etc. So any novel, any text which addresses the issue of gender issues or the issue of race and identity, please give more importance to those texts. Then we have Ramesh Gunasekadas, eminent novelist, famous for writing Reef. Bangladeshi novelists like Tahamina Anam, novels include A Golden Age, The Good Muslim. We also have Jia Haidar Rahman, who had written In the Light of What We Know. Monica Ali, famous diaspora writer, famous for writing novel Brick Lane. But apart from Brick Lane, you have to read Alan Tejo Blue. Bapsi Sidhwa, Water or Cracking India, I have already mentioned her. Hanif Qureshi, another Pakistan novelist. The Buddha of Suburbia, Intimacy, Gabriel Gifts, The Body are his important works. Zulfikar Ghosh, The Murder of Aziz Khan. Then we have the Pakistan-born British novelist Tariq Ali. He is famous for writing novels like Bush in Babylon, the Islam Quintet series, the series of 5 novels. Then we have Mohsin Hamid, famous for writing Moth Smoke, The Reluctant Fundamentalist, Exit West. Kamila Shamshi, She wrote Burn Shadows, Cartography, Home, etc. Nadim Aslam and Muhammad Hanif, who are famous for writing maps for lost lovers and a case for exploding mangoes, respectively. And this novel, A Case for Exploding Mangoes, is very important because it deals with the murder of the Pakistani president, right? So I think I have touched on, I think, all the important areas of world literature. I might have missed a few of them. So you can always add important novels to your own choice or any other works which you seem fit in this category. So then if I might sum up my arguments, you see the first technique, which I had already mentioned, focus on lesser known works, because nowadays questions are coming from lesser known works of authors, right? So focus more on women writers, black writers, Dalit writers, right? Give more emphasis on contemporary fiction, the late modern era, I mean the post-World War era. So roughly 70 to 80 years. So world literature in these 70 to 80 years. Briefly read the biographies of writers who have received Nobel Prize, Booker Prize, Sahitya Academy Award. So they are of worth reading. Concentrate on any intertextual element on the text, right? So intertextuality is another very important aspect of reading fiction. Last but not the least, remember the subtitles, the setting of the text, the year of publication, the minor characters, right? And again, I am requesting you that please create your own personal notebook. It is immensely helpful. And lastly, I would like to again go back to my formula of 3R: read, repeat, and revise. Read as much as you can, repeat your reading, and allot or dedicate a particular day in the week where you can, when you can revise all your studies, all your readings. So revision is of foremost importance. Then there are a few books which might be helpful to you. Andrew Saunders' History of English Literature, Palgrave Publishing, The History of English Literature, edited by Michael Alexander. You can read Catherine Van Spankeren, Outline of American Literature, a very useful book for young students and scholars. A.K. Mehrotra's book on Indian literature, Indian English literature. And if you want to explore the genre of fiction, Steve Kumar and Keith F. McKeon book, Critical Approaches to Fiction from Atlantic Publisher, is a must read. And lastly, if you find any difficulty, if you find any problem in reading a novel, or if you don't find any information in the library, just Google. So nowadays, Google is God. So Google or internet is always there. So you have to hugely rely on internet and Google. So again, lastly, thank you to all of you for your patience, listening my lecture patiently. I wish you all the best. Hope all the students who are watching this lecture may crack NET exam in the very first attempt. My prayers are with you. And if you face any difficulty, you can reach me. You can mail me. My email ID is given here. So thanks to all of you. Over to you, madam.
Thank you so much, sir. Those were insightful words. Your thoughts and your views have enlightened in mind and have shown us new paths. And my gratitude to you, sir, for gracing your occasion and sharing your opinions today to correct NET and JRF. Thank you so much, sir, sharing your experience, especially how did you crack the NET and JRF. Thank you so much, sir. And I wish this conference, this online workshop has enlightened us all and provided with approaches with best strategies involving in cracking the exam. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks and acknowledge the contribution of those who work round the clock to make this workshop successful. I, Sheikh Anam, on behalf of the B.N.N.College Bhiwandi and the entire fraternity of the institution, first of all, extend my most sincere thanks to the Almighty God for making today's event a resounding success. With His blessing and grace, we are able to make this event what it was. I extend a really heart vote of thanks to our speaker and eminent presenter, Mr. Raj Mukhopadhyay, who spared time from his busiest schedule to grace the occasion. Today, we had an opportunity to hear your thoughts, sir, and this will surely be going to encourage us in our future even. A special mention to our respected organizer for being the catalyst that stimulated us to do our best and standing as pillars of strength. With a deep sense of appreciation, we thank our loving Professor Rajni Wagmare for her untiring effort and guiding us through the entire workshop. I would like to end by giving the information about tomorrow's workshop and on the topic Language Basic Concepts and Theories, Pedagogy, English in Use by the speaker Apurva Shahi. The workshop will be hosted by Himangi Yadav. Dear viewers, stay tuned with us for tomorrow at the same time. Thank you. Take care. God bless you. Thank you.